Good evening. This is Sarah Lacey, Chair of the County Council. Welcome to our virtual GDP work session on this third winter and April Fool's Day here in Maryland. Madam Secretary, can you please call the roll?
Yes, Madam Chair. Ms. Lacey.
Present.
Ms. Pickard.
Present.
Mr. Volkey.
Present.
Mr. Pruski.
Here.
Ms. Fiedler. Ms. Radvian.
Here.
Ms. Hare.
Present.
Madam Legislative Counsel Linda Schuett.
I'm here.
And Madam Auditor Michelle Belair.
Present.
Madam Chair, we have 6 council and legislative council and the county auditor here with us. I do believe Ms. Fiedler is trying to join. I'm going to help her with that in just a moment.
Thank you, Madam Secretary, and welcome to our new county auditor, Ms. Bolair. It's nice to see you. Thank you. So I have a little script to read for this work session. I need to remind everyone here this evening, especially members of the public, that it is the policy of the County Council that all of our meetings be accessible to people with disabilities. We began having our virtual meetings captioned in September of last year to boost accessibility. And in order for this to work properly, it is very important that all participants say their names before speaking every time and use mute unless it is your turn to speak. And to any members of the public who are watching us, if you need assistance to participate, view, or listen to any of our meetings due to a disability, please call or email our administrative officer at least 5 business days prior to the scheduled meeting to request an accommodation. Contact information is available on our website, and our main telephone number is 410-222-1401. And with that, I would like to welcome Mr. Pete Barron and the Plan 2040 GDP team. Mr. Barron, you have the floor.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the council. We have your regularly scheduled team who has been working on this and who's been with us in previous meetings. I will go through them real quickly just so everybody knows who is here. We have from the admin side, we have Miss Lori Rhodes, our Deputy CAO for Land Use, Matt Johnston, our Environmental Policy Director. From OPZ, we have a whole bunch of folks, and I'm going to try not to leave anybody off. We have our director, Mr. Stephen Kai Ziegler, although I don't see him on my list right now, but maybe he's here. We have Miss Pompa and Miss Carrier. We have Mr. Wildonger, Mr. Hughes. From Health, we have Mr. Herb. From DPW, our director, Chris Phipps, is here. From Law, we have Miss Lori Blair Klausmeyer and Miss Kenny. And I'm going to scroll and make sure with 2 screens, I see Mr. Kai Ziegler. Oh, from Transportation, we have Miss Azur McIntosh. And from Rec and Parks, we have Miss Matthews. If I've left anybody off, when there's a question, we'll bring them up. But I think that's pretty much your team here. The administration understands there have been about 40 or so amendments circulated. Many of them will be discussed tonight, so I see no reason to delay. We're happy to take any general questions first, or if the will of the council is to jump into amendments, administration stands ready to begin that discussion.
This is Chair Lacey. Thank you, Mr. Barron. Welcome, Ms. Fiedler. And we are going to go through the overall list of possible amendments. Some of them may not be amendments that are actually introduced on April 5th, or they may be changed. So The amendments that we will be talking about tonight are not numbered. We know them by their lead sponsor. Some may have a co-sponsor, but we're organized by lead sponsor. And the entire council has seen a spreadsheet that groups of all of the amendments together by their different topics. It is my thinking that if we try to stick with these topics, we might have a conversation that is more easy for the public and anybody watching to be able to follow. And you know, who knows, it might actually be easier for us to follow ourselves. Wouldn't that be nice? So with that, the first topic on that spreadsheet is region plans and stakeholder advisory committees. I'll just kind of throw that topic out there, and anybody who wants to make a comment, you'll either raise your flag or your hand. I'll recognize you and I will mute right away so it shows up in the transcript as your comment. With that, I see Mr. Pruski's hand. Mr. Pruski, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Andrew Pruski, Councilman District 4. I actually have two amendments that were shared with the council in regards to the Stakeholder Advisory Committee. Madam Chair, I don't know if they could be put on the screen or I could just discuss them. Not sure what order. I know we don't have numbers, but I can talk about the one related to the number of people that would recommend on the Stakeholder Advisory Committee, and that is an amendment to have 9 through 15, 2/3 being residents, and also requirements of adding characteristics. So again, I don't know if staff has those available to show, but oh, there we go. Look at that magic. I'll wait till they come up on the screen so I can talk further. Alrighty, so again, as was stated, there is no number to this amendment. The first one, as you see here, is some additions and changes to the recommended composition of the committee. I know there was some talk with some of my colleagues about renters versus property owners, and I think we provided some recommended language here for that. We also added HOA Civic Association. And in addition, each of our areas, you know, the council in Arundel County is a very diverse place. So obviously, each area has some unique things to it. So Maritime, in my area, it's, you know, Department of Defense, Fort Meade, affordable housing in some areas, school organizations. I know we talked about young adults as well. Again, all these things are listed here. But again, with this amendment, we're trying to be as diverse and welcoming as possible to the regional stakeholder committees that will partake. And I'll just stop right there to see if anybody has any questions. And then if staff wanted to put up the next amendment after we're finished with this discussion about the composition of the committee, we could do that as well. So again, I'll stop there if the admin wants to say anything or any of my comments. Thank you.
Mr. Volkey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nathan Volkey, District 3. Good evening. I just want to add on to what Mr. Pruski said. I've joined this as a co-sponsor because I think he and Ms. Fiedler did a nice job putting together a lot of thoughts that I was thinking about too, and I thought they did a nice job with it. The one thing I want to make sure it's clear for anybody watching at home is that this list, as I understand it, is not a requirement that you have someone from each of these categories. This is sort of a representative sampling of the types of people that we'd like to have on there. And I think that was important because we want to make sure that there's flexibility for both the county executive and the council as we're putting together the regional committees. So I just wanted to add that note to the explanation that I think Mr. Pruski offered, just to make sure that everyone was clear on that. Thank you.
Ms. Fiedler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Amanda Fiedler, District 5. I just want to echo the sentiments of my colleagues and thank Mr. Pruski for really working together on this. Our last work session, he and I presented similar yet different amendments, and we were able to come together on this one. So thank you.
Madam Chair, Nathan Volkey, District 7.
I see you.
Okay, Mr. Barron.
Yes, Mr. Barron, and then Mr. Volkey. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Pete Barron with the administration. Just gonna join the chorus of Kumbaya. Appreciate everybody working together to come to this. We think this is a good amendment. The administration supports. And I use my raised hand.
Mr. Volkey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nathan Volkey, District 3. I was just going to comment on Mr. Barron's raise hand function. I wasn't sure if everybody was familiar with it being in the corner, so that's nice.
Chair Lacey speaking. I am learning to see it actually. It's sort of, I've seen it before, but it's different when you're going to actually call on people to notice that it's there. And especially being so used to our flags. Mr. Pruski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was going to move the agenda along. You know me. We don't waste time. So let's go right into the stakeholder composition. If staff had that, that was the amendment related to the membership. Again, what you saw before was who could be recommended to be on the committee. This next amendment talks about the composition of the committee. So that could be loaded. We'll have that come up here in a second. Thank you so much to Kaylee and Laura behind the scenes. And what this amendment does is actually provides a little greater clarification. I know I did work with the administration to get feedback on this, but ultimately, for those of you that don't know, the general development plan and this whole process, particularly the regional plans with the stakeholder committees, it's very important that we obviously have a process where the county executive and the county council are working together. And essentially kind of going back and forth about what that would look like, how it would go. And one of the things that we're certainly trying to do is to make sure that the membership of the committee is wide and diverse. For those of you that don't know, the original small area plans from years ago used to have 25 people on them. I'm not recommending that, and I don't think any of the council members or other folks would, but certainly we want to make sure that there's some involvement. And what this amendment does, again, is allows the county executive to choose folks, but confirmation by the council. So there is a process where we can work together. Also, we have membership, ranging obviously to that 9 to 15. So obviously we have a minimum, you have a maximum, and also there was something brought up earlier of a concern that these committees would be composed of folks who don't live in the area, because ultimately constituents want to be a part of what occurs and what happens in their community. So obviously, we talked about that fact of having 2/3, from that area and other things. So again, I think this is a process that we certainly would like to bring forward. I'll leave it there for my colleagues, but again, I think this involves a way where the county executive still has an appointment authority, which is currently in the code, and then county council obviously comes and confirms. And we also provide some definitions of getting a wide range of diverse body. Thank you.
Mr. Barron.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Pete Barron with the administration. Want to thank the council member for working with us as this was discussed. The administration always understood that we would be working with council members who represent those regions to help identify and find great candidates for these committees. You all are closer to the ground, have relationships with individual community groups and know probably a larger number of folks. And we always assumed that we would be working very closely with the council members. Therefore, we have no problems codifying that intent. So with that, we support the amendment.
Ms. Fiedler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is actually related to this area, but not this specific amendment. And this is hot off the press, so I apologize that it has not been sent out yet to administration or our colleagues, but I did share at our last work session an amendment that I was working on that would have given council members each an even number of appointments to the Stakeholder Advisory Committee. When thinking about how you put that into practice, it gets a little complicated when we have 9 to 15 members and multiple council members in a region. So reached out to staff and tried to find a way that we could still have council appointments, but not make it overly complicated. And the county executive would still get the majority of appointments with council approval. So when ready, if we can put that amendment on the screen. I worked with Councilman Volkey as well. He was working on something very similar at the same time. essentially, this gives a floating appointment so that each region that has a council member, the council members would get one appointment each. It's not the two that I had hoped for, but it was the easiest way to not complicate it and still give council voice to those appointments. And I'm happy to let Councilman Volkey share any thoughts as well if he has them.
Mr. Barron, do you have any comments at this time? I guess it sounds like you haven't actually, the administration hasn't seen this yet, so I understand if you don't have any comments, then we'll move on.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Pete Barron with the administration. I'll refrain from comment until we have a chance to review.
And we'll be sending that over, I think, pretty shortly.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions of Mr. Volkey?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nathan Volkey, District 3. I don't want to cut off the discussion on this particular amendment, but keeping with Mr. Prusky, because there are so many amendments, I was going to bring up another one. But if people have things on this, I can wait.
That's fine. Go ahead, Mr. Volkey.
Okay, so if I could, Nathan Volkey, District 3 again, have Ms. Schultz or maybe Ms. Corby put up the amendment that I had related to regional plan precedents. I'd appreciate that, just because I think that's kind of in this same topic area that we're talking about, the SAT and the SAC and the regional plans. Okay, thank you. So I know the administration is working on a similar amendment. This comes out of our discussions that we've had the past few meetings where we have discussed the GDP, and it's been made very clear repeatedly that the regional plans will be sort of an amendment to the underlying GDP. It'll be another chance for the community to weigh in on a more localized level about particular land and how they want to see that land used. What I want to ensure is that there is no confusion about how the two plans overlay with one another. For instance, the GDP and then the regional plans. I believe technically the GDP is always the controlling land use document, but by way of the process that we're using this time, I want to make it clear that the regional plans are coming in and are actually taking precedent over the underlying land use and the GDP, because I think that's important both for the community to feel like they have an opportunity to change things in the GDP when their region comes up, but also for the landowners who have questions about how this is all going to work. If, for instance, they put in a request, there are a number of places I know where staff through OPZ recommended no change at this time, but they have made statements about we could revisit this in the regional planning process. So I want to ensure that just legally the document is clear that we are in fact intending for the regional plans to take precedence over the general development plan. Happy to take any questions.
Mr. Barron.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Pete Barron with the administration. Appreciate the spirit of the councilman's amendment. The council should be shared with an administration amendment on basically the same topic. Maybe I can ask Ms. Schultz to put that up so we can look at these two side by side. The administration, we think we captured the spirit of what the councilman's working on as well. And I think be no surprise, we prefer our version, but I think it accomplishes pretty much the same goal. There is some state law here at play, and the word precedence versus the word amendment. And if you go down, I think it's at the second page of this amendment, you'll see that we have put some language in to make it explicit to this very point that the region plan is considered an amendment.
Ms. Hare.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jessica Hare, District 7. I guess I have one comment and one question. The first comment, I think on Mr. Volkey's amendment, I just want to make sure, I think it said small area plans as opposed to region plans. And I want to make sure that we're using the correct language with whatever amendment comes forward. And then I guess my second question is for Office of Law. legally speaking, what's the difference between saying supersede and amends? In other words, what's the legal difference between these two amendments?
This is Pete Barron. I think Kelly Kenny, if she's on, has worked on that. She might be the right person from Office of Law.
Sure, Kelly Kenny, supervising county attorney. It really, the terms are almost similar, almost the same. One uses supersede, one uses amend. The way that the administration's amendment is written, it makes it just a little bit more clear that any changes that are adopted in the region plan become amendments to the GDP. So in essence, it becomes part of the GDP. It makes that clear, which would be very important in the future when any changes need to be consistent with the GDP. It'll be clear that those plans that are adopted with the region plan are going to be part of that GDP.
Ms. Hare?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jessica Hare, District 7. One follow-up question on that. So I've had a few constituents reach out to me concerned with sort of what happens in the interim between when the GDP is passed and then when the regional plans actually, while they're ongoing until they're passed, and what happens with that. Would either phrase, supersede versus amend, change the fact that really my understanding is land use changes are not occurring or rezonings are not occurring until the regional plans are adopted? Would either of these amendments have any kind of nuance in there that would affect that differently?
Sorry, I lost my mute button for a minute. Supervising county attorney. No, because the rezoning won't occur until after the region plans take place, and then the comprehensive rezoning will occur after that point. So there'll be no change as far as that goes.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Does anyone else have anything else to discuss at this time about region plans and stakeholder advisory committees? We can always take those questions later if you want. No big deal, but we can move on to the next topic. And I also want to let you know, I'm training my eye. I can see the raised hands and I can see the yellow flags and I can see all of you when documents are showing. It's all good. Whatever you want to do, I will call on you. Okay, so with that, the next topic that we have is any amendments or, if it's not even an amendment yet, but you want to just bring it up to talk about goals, strategies, and policies. Anyone? Ms. Hare.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jessica Hare, District 7. I have, I believe, 2 amendments, so I'll just go with the first one that's on this list here. It's the Healthy Communities 10, HC 10 goal. I'm not sure if we can pull that one up. Okay. So during my conversations with constituents, it came to my attention that the county's evacuation plan in general seems to be lacking in the evacuation shelters. And it looks like the vast majority of problems with that come in lacking generators for various facilities. So this came up in my conversation specifically with some folks in District 7 who from the very tip of District 7 are told, they can go to Southern High School, I believe, and other than that, it's Annapolis. That's a long way in a natural disaster or some sort of emergency where everyone has to evacuate. And it's my understanding that problem exists all countywide. These are issues that exist in all 7 districts. So one of the recommendations that had come from my conversations with the constituents was to really make sure that our evacuation plan in the county includes adequate evacuation shelters, and really an evaluation on how we get that. Is it just more generators? Is there something else we need to do? We need to make sure that if we're asking people to evacuate, we have a place for them to go that's both close enough and can have adequate capacity. So all this does is add some language to goal HC10 that we should include a comprehensive evacuation plan with adequate evacuation shelters. Thanks.
Mr. Barron?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Pete Barron. This is a great amendment. Administration supports.
Mr. Pruski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think this fits under strategies and goals, but I actually have an amendment to delete strategy 16 under goal BE1 and policy BE1 of 1, planning in the built environment, and it relates to BRAC, mixed use development. I had a great meeting with the planning and zoning office, and I understood where they were coming from. I think the concern that I had in regards to BRAC mixed use is that while BRAC is not here, it's still occurring. I literally was on a call yesterday when someone used the term 64,000 people going in and outside the gates of Fort Meade every day. Now, of course, you know that number is going to increase even further. So when we say BRAC, even though for those of you who don't know that space realignment and closure, that did occur, but that process is still ongoing. The implications, and we did have this mixed use development process. I do believe, and I know the administration is aware of this, that when they do have the regional plans, this should be a discussion where we can work together to figure out whether this still fits. But for now, I'm recommending that we delete that. The plan was to just, delete it altogether, but I wanted to remove that section, from there just because of what is occurring through around in Fort Meade, because I do believe there is some value to that. And there are also some projects still in the pipeline that are under that. So again, I'm looking forward to the regional stakeholder committees revisiting this, but I think at this time, I raised those concerns and it's kind of where I'm at. Thank you.
Mr. Barron.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Pete Barron. Appreciate the council members' discussion with the team at OPZ. The administration supports this amendment.
Ms. Fiedler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Amanda Fiedler, District 5. I don't have a question on this amendment. I was just prepared to share another policy goal strategy amendment if there were no other questions.
Well, this is Chair Lacy. I don't see any others at this time, so you can go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm going to go over the amendment that was shared earlier with you all on forest mitigation banks. That is policy or goal NE2, policy NE 2.1. If Ms. Schultz could share. This amendment really actually came out of conversations during our forest conservation bill and learning about forest mitigation banks and that there is a desire for them. So I think it's important to have this this in the GDP, but we also need a strong way to implement it by creating a streamlined process. So it adds that language and really makes it a broad instead of private forest mitigation banks, because every tree, regardless of public or private property, is important.
Mr. Barron.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I'm not mistaken, this amendment was shared with the administration like 2 hours ago. So I would like to refrain from comment at this time, but we are looking at it and appreciate the councilwoman sharing with it. We're just not prepared to fully comment on it without having a full review.
Ms. Rodban.
Lisa Rodban, District 6. If there aren't, I don't want to interrupt any discussion about Ms. Fiedler's, but I have an amendment that's on a similar topic, so I thought it'd be appropriate to go next.
This is the chair again, and I will just say, anybody who wants to speak on something should just jump in with your hand or your flag, and I'll call on you. And if it's that way, we'll just keep the discussion going. And if we start to move on, that's cool too. So let's do that. Go ahead, please.
Lisa Rodban, District 6. Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is the one, it's on policy built environment 1.5. And this is also relating to the forest con and also relating to mitigation banks. This would just basically, sorry, I need to get, be able to see my own amendment in front of me. Basically to, this I guess straddles actually a couple areas, but when the county reviews and Board of Education state reviews surplus property, which we have little pieces of here and there, to be sure to consider forestation banks as a possible use, as well as affordable housing.
Mr. Barron.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Pete Barron. Appreciate the Councilwoman bringing this idea, this concept forward and working with OPZ and the admin to craft it. We support this. If we can keep it going, the administration as a forest amendment that we could maybe, if Ms. Schultz could bring up, if appropriate. Pete Barron with the administration. Want to commend Ms. Schultz's speed there. Want to actually thank Councilwoman Councilwoman Pickard and her assistant for spotting this issue. This is a technical, I guess you could say, correction to the language in goal NE2 to make sure that it was clear. I think the way it was originally drafted, we had it flipped. So this corrects it to be what the intent was, that the clarifies that the mitigation requirements should be increased. So if maybe somebody from OPZ, if Ms. Pompa wants to speak on this, I'm not sure I fully explained that properly. Or maybe Mr. Johnston.
Sure, I think you said it correctly. It just suggests to increase the mitigation requirements when more than the threshold is cleared on a site. Before it had said retain, and that was just an error in the use of the word.
This is the chair. Does anyone else have any comments on forest related things? I know Ms. Pickard, you have many amendments in the goals, policies, and strategies category. If you want to take us to another topic. Looking for flags or hands.
Sure. Madam Chair, Allison Pickard, D2.
Why, thank you.
I will continue the conversation with pick one, anyone from my list, but I was actually about to raise my hand to pull up the amendment regarding, which number? BE 1.1.A14, the OPZ text amendment consistency. And I was a little uncomfortable with the original. I'm a little uncomfortable with the original wording, and this amendment just, I think, clarifies. I think it brings it into a more appropriate, states the goal in a more appropriate way, given the separate powers within the executive branch and the legislative branch. So this would change the wording a little bit, but words matter. So we will substitute in this language, consider adding language in Article 17 and 18 that the planning and zoning officer must advise the county council whether a text amendment is consistent with the GDP when the council considers a text amendment. So that's going forward. It changed the way it is written in the current document. I just wasn't comfortable with. I don't know if anybody has any comments or if the administration.
Mr. Barron?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I want to thank Councilwoman Pickard for working with us in bringing this issue forward. The administration is comfortable with her change.
I can keep going, Madam Chair, if you'd like.
Please go ahead to your next one.
Allison Pickard, D2. I have 3 amendments that are all very similar regarding goal B8 and policy B8.1. Evaluating land included in village centers, town centers. I think there's a third one, or maybe it's just those 2. It just revises the language to state that through the region planning process, we'll evaluate the extent of land included in village central land use designations to accommodate the county's forecasted development needs, so that the region planning groups can actually determine if the boundaries of said village centers or town centers are the appropriate boundaries. They may need to be expanded or something as we look closer at each of them. So those 2, that's what those are about.
Mr. Barron?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Pete Barron. Again, thank the sponsor for discussing this with us in advance. The administration supports both of these amendments, the Village Center and the Town Center.
Next, Ms. Pickard? If you want, or
that's fine. I some of the amendments, Allison Pickard D2 aren't, they're sort of self-explanatory, but there is one regarding PUDs. I think this is a forward-thinking document, and as we get into region planning, I'm concerned with some of the specificity written in to the GDP, so I prefer the language that has been drafted here today. On this amendment, review the planned unit development requirements, including a study of appropriate zoning districts, review and improve codes as necessary with the intent that this type of development should be consistent with the GDP, encourage development that is imaginative and innovative and offers a variety of dwelling unit types, densities, and site arrangements with well-integrated community facilities and services. Through my lengthy meetings with OPZ and our research, it's clear that the way PUD development has changed in Anne Arundel County over the years has left a little room for improvement, or possibly even going back to the way we used to utilize PUD development. So I think rather than, I think we need to review it rather than predetermine the outcome. So that's what this amendment is about regarding planned unit development.
Mr. Barron?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, thank the sponsor for the discussions on this. The administration has no objection to this amendment.
Ms. Hare?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jessica Hare, District 7. I was just going to say I really like the wording of this amendment. So that was it.
Thank you. This is Chair Lacey. I actually will reveal that I live in a PUD. So as apparently other folks on this work session do. And so I'm glad that we are keeping PUDs and not throwing them out altogether. But I wonder if the language in that amendment, it just occurs to me that maybe it could be a little broader about including or incorporating natural features that exist in an area. I know that there have been a lot of concerns about cluster development and the way that is used in a PUD to end up actually still negatively impacting the environment by the clustering and putting in more density than may have otherwise been allowed in an inappropriate place. But I think we can write our particular policies and actual code to avert that problem. What I'm wondering is just then, for the purpose of this amendment, whether anyone thinks this language already includes natural features as something that can be specifically considered in the creation of a PUD or not.
Allison Pickard, D2. Thank you, Madam Chair, for that addition. I'm sort of scrambling to figure out where the strategy sits in the whole document to see what surrounds it, because there's I'll have to I certainly agree with your comments. I'm just not sure if that concept isn't captured somewhere in the document already, but I will look at it. Thank you.
This is the chair. It is definitely difficult to do that on the fly. That's well understood. Mr. Barron.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was going to go basically say the same thing. We're happy to put our heads together after tonight to look at that issue.
Okay, Ms. Fiedler and Ms. Hare, you're going to have to duke it out. Your flags came out at exactly the same time. Actually, I'll call on Ms. Fiedler first this time.
That's fair. I think I may know where Ms. Hare is going, but since Councilwoman Pickard mentioned specificity, I'd like to talk about ephemeral streams and goals, policies, and strategies. I have an amendment that was set around, and Mr. Barron, I apologize if you did not get this one until today. It may have been one that got to you earlier. Emails have been flying around fast and furious. So if Ms. Schultz could share the ephemeral goal NE1. So this amendment really came out of our work session and follow-up conversations. First, a lot of us had never even heard of an ephemeral stream until reading this document. So knowing a little bit more about what an ephemeral stream is, I wasn't comfortable with how specific the goal was. So this keeps the ephemeral streams as, the policy was, this keeps the goal of identifying them in the GDP, but it doesn't hone in on the specifics. And I think that that's something that should be done at a later date, but at this juncture, I was more comfortable with this language.
Mr. Barron, do you want to comment now, or should we ask, where'd she go? Ms. Hare. Oh, there she is. I see her. Since the two are, it doesn't matter to me, but I wonder if it makes sense if you wanted to hold your comments till she brings up hers.
I'll just flag. Thank you, Madam Chair, Pete Barron. I'll just flag. This is another one of the amendments that we didn't get until a couple hours before the meeting, so we haven't had a chance to fully digest it. But there is the other ephemeral stream amendment that we are prepared to discuss at the moment.
Okay, well, now that the record is clear, the chair will ask Ms. Hare to go to your amendment, please.
Sure. So, Madam Chair, Jessica Hare, District 7. Before we go to that one, we can, but it's in the definitions group. Did we want to finish up the goal strategies, or do you want me to jump to the definition one?
Let's go ahead and stick with ephemeral streams for the time being.
Okay, perfect.
The limited time being, it's ephemeral.
Sure.
Okay, sorry, I have to stop all these.
Okay. Madam Secretary, could we pull up the ephemeral stream definition? So, and this is a bit of a work in progress. Councilwoman Fiedler and I had shared this with the council and the administration, and I know we did get some comments back from the administration, and I think, I'll speak for myself only, I think most of your suggestions made sense. I did have one follow-up question, but essentially this came from the discussion, the last work session we had, because I was not familiar with this term and the way it was defined in the GDP to begin with, and Mr. Johnson very kindly clarified. So the intent of this amendment is just to capture exactly what Mr. Johnson had clarified was the intent of the definition to begin with. And I think we'll probably see a few more tweaks before Monday based on some conversations with the administration, but I think what you will see is something very similar to this, and really just to clarify that it's not a man-made thing. This is a natural stream that occurs. It's not the ditch that, the stormwater ditch that goes down the side of the road kind of a thing.
Mr. Barron?
Thank you, Madam Chair, Pete Barron. And I don't think I have much to add to Councilwoman Hare there. Appreciate the dialogue that we've had over the past 48 hours or so on streams or ephemeral and not ephemeral. But these are, I think it's a good amendment. I think there's room for us to tweak it a little bit, and appreciate that. I think we'll be able to wordsmith this to the right place. Mr. Johnson, maybe you want to give a little bit more, but I think Ms. Hare pretty much covered making sure that it's clear that they're natural.
Okay, then Chair Lacey will ask a question perhaps Mr. Johnston will like to answer. In the amendment, can you explain why the absence of forest litter is important to the definition of an ephemeral stream?
So Matt Johnston, Environmental Policy Director. Actually, that is one of the things that we are circulating via email over the last few hours that I'd like to work, that the administration would like to work on the sponsors with. We very much appreciate the definition that's in here, but as I shared with Councilwoman Hare, the most important thing that a qualified professional is going to look at out on site, the objective thing rather than subjective, is there groundwater or is there not? These are not fed by groundwater. They're fed by stormwater runoff, surface water, if you will. So they aren't going to necessarily look at where there's a lack of leaf litter that could be kicked by an animal or could be kicked by kids in a gully. They're going to look for, was water flowing through there and was it groundwater or not? So just really like the amendment, but just working on that, tweaking that language, just like you said.
Thank you. Anybody else with comments on that? I think according to my spreadsheet, we've probably covered many or most of the goals, strategies, and policies, but if anyone wants to talk about that further, we can, or we can move on. We have a category called other. I think that's a little bit confusing. If you know that your stuff is in other, just go ahead and bring it up, anytime. Okay. And so I will call on Ms. Radvian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Lisa Radvian, District 6. So I wanted to briefly talk about Built Environment 11.2. And if you wouldn't mind putting that up on the screen for us. While that's happening, I'll just describe. This is, if you're not familiar with accessory dwelling units, this is a slight alteration to the definition. Hang on, looking to the neighborhood preservation definition, and to ensure that when we're talking about neighborhood preservation, that we're not so strict that we can't do things that can be helpful for homeowners and families, can provide not enormous amounts of affordable housing, but can provide, can be one of the tools in the bag in terms of affordable housing. And so this just asks that accessory dwelling units be included in the definition of infill, or along with infill in neighborhood preservation. I think this is a direction that a lot of jurisdictions around the country are going in order to help homeowners stay in their homes when they have, high mortgage payments, when they are able to rent out a small space, on their property that's this accessory dwelling unit. And I'm happy to talk more about accessory dwelling units if any of my colleagues have questions. And maybe I can even hand out my little information sheet about accessory dwelling units because I learned about them and I'm a big fan now. And I think they should come to Anne Arundel County.
Mr. Barron?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Pete Barron. Appreciate the sponsor sharing this with us. I was just trying to read on the screen. It looks like there was a typo, but I think it's been caught. So I think that's, I don't have anything else to add on the technical side. We are comfortable with this amendment and are happy to support.
Ms. Pickard, did you want to speak to this particular proposed amendment? No. Okay. Ms. Hare, you had your flag up before.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jessica Hare, District 7. It's not on this amendment, though. I was going to take us back to my last one in the goals policies. So if anyone else.
No, that's fine. Go ahead.
All right. Could we please pull up the amendment for policy HE 2.5? It's the sustainable agriculture one. And while it's coming up, I'll just start describing. We, when the ag tourism special events bill came before the council, we had a lot of testimony. And one of the things that I really took away from it was that the county doesn't yet have a fully comprehensive strategy on facilitating this type of sustainable agriculture. What is it that's going to make, and it's a lot of moving pieces probably, but what is it that's really going to facilitate this kind of consistent, sustainable agriculture in the county? The GDP sort of dances around it. There are a number of places where they talk about sustainable food sources, but they don't actually, it never comes out directly and says to facilitate a sustainable agriculture practice in the county. So all this does is adds a sentence onto policy HE 2.5, which after conversations with planning and zoning is where they think it fits the best. That just asks the county to do just that, develop a comprehensive strategy. And it lists, Economic Development Corporation as well as OPZ as the designated lead and support on this.
Mr. Barron.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Pete Barron. Not much to add to the sponsor's description. The administration supports.
Fantastic. Ms. Pickard.
Allison Pickard, D2. So moving along to, I have an amendment to strategy BE1.1.A12, reviewing special exception of assisted living. It's very simple, but again, words matter. And I'm striking the word revise and changing that word to review. Again, getting at that specificity, and we are in the process. There's a lot of goals and policies regarding senior housing in this GDP. But as we move through the legislative process, I think I would prefer to see this council and the administration review policies regarding rather than predetermine that we will be revising them. It's kind of simple.
Mr. Barron.
Thank you, Pete Barron with the administration. Agree with the sponsor. We are comfortable with this. No objection.
Ms. Rodvian, do you want to speak to this or go to something new?
This would be on a different amendment.
I think that's fine. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Lisa Rodvian, District 6. So this is in the other category for my colleagues who are following along on the spreadsheet. This particular amendment, basically just when we talk about the changing demographics in the county, just ensures that we are really thinking about our changing demographics as an opportunity and not as a challenge. The diversity of our changing demographics is a beautiful thing. And I don't think it was intended to, I don't think it was intended, but I think it's a mindset that we should, think of diversity as something to embrace and something as an opportunity. I think we all know that one of the challenges of the general development plan is that, the county government has no has no control over the people, the number of people coming to our county. And so, or what backgrounds they come from. And of course, we wouldn't want to, but we do have the ability to make sure that when people are coming to the county, we've provided sufficient land use for people to have places to live. And I think when we talk about demographics, we need to be thinking about opportunities. So that's what this is. And it makes a change in 2 different places. On page 33 of volume 1 and 57, also volume 1.
Mr. Barron?
Pete Barron with the administration. The administration supports.
Okay, this is the chair. I'll say I want to commend my colleague, Ms. Rodbian, for observing that and proposing a flip, which I think is actually very characteristic of a teacher and some other professions, to take challenges and turn them into opportunities. But it also should be characteristic of how we're seeing the entire plan. And so I'm going to be very pleased to support your amendment. Now, did you have another, or would somebody else like to jump in? Mr. Pruski, I've been told you have internet issues, but I see you now. Do you want to jump in while you can? You're good. Okay, so I see Ms. Pickard and Ms. Fiedler. I'll go Ms. Pickard and then Ms. Fiedler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is Allison Pickard, D2. I have an amendment that's been shared with everybody. It is regarding, oh gosh, I'm like jumping around with pages and worksheets. Strategy BE3.1.G, infill, redevelopment, and neighborhood preservation. There's a companion amendment to this, as we will get to later, with a definition of compatibility. But I really want to make sure that as we move forward in our planning for this county, decades away, that we ensure infill and redevelopment in the county's neighborhood preservation policy area complements or blends with the existing built and planned character of the area and the cultural and environmental heritage of the area. I think we can all get a sense that with our different decades of development, as we move forward to improve and create thriving communities, the way we build may not be exactly the same as the way we did decades before. So we want to just make sure that our communities and the new meets old, it complements or blends with what's currently there or what we're trying to shape in our community. So that's the change. It's subtle, but I think it's important.
Mr. Barron.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Pete Barron with the administration. Happy to support this amendment. We think it's a really good amendment.
Any comments? Ms. Fiedler, your turn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Amanda Fiedler, District 5, and I will be jumping on as a co-sponsor to that amendment, Ms. Pickard. So thank you. I think it's a great amendment. If we could pull up the Bay Bridge amendment that has been shared. I know Ms. Schultz is working rapidly behind the scenes. This was something that I touched on during our last work session, and it doesn't really get into any details. It's a high level, just we are going to, over the course of the next decades, while we wait for the potential of a third span of a Bay Bridge somewhere, that we will continue to have communications and are open to talking about and analyzing traffic mitigation technology. Technology is emerging rapidly in all areas. Traffic is no different. So if there are opportunities to implement these strategies and technologies, I think that we should consider them to get folks moving, especially on this peninsula or any other peninsula impacted by Bay Bridge traffic.
Mr. Barron.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Pete Barron with the administration. Want to say this is a very good amendment the administration supports. This is something that we are currently doing now. It makes sense to include it here. These challenges are very real, and it is something I see Mr. Zoom McIntosh has joined us and is nodding her head, so that makes me feel good. This is definitely something that needs to be front and center.
Ms. Hare.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jessica Hare, District 7. I have one amendment in the other category that I think is fairly self-explanatory. It's the amendment on the council adopted versus council amendment. If Ms. Schultz could pull that one up. This came from, and I apologize now, I can't remember whether it was a recommendation from Ms. Schuett or whether it was a recommendation from Office of Law. So whoever it was, please let me know so you can take credit for it. This was the third column under the Lucas, the SR, et cetera. It says council adopted, and there was some discussion at the last work session about how that might be a little bit confusing, and that really that should be changed to council amendment. So that's all this amendment does. It literally just changes council adopted to council amendment so that we understand that anything that's not amended is adopted as it was recommended by OPZ.
Mr. Barron.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Forgot to raise my hand for that one. Pete Barron with the administration. Appreciate the sponsor. This was a discussion and I think a point of that needed some clarification. So very good amendment. We support.
Okay, I think Ms. Hare, I see your hand is still up, but I'm not sure if you wanted to. Okay, Ms. Pickard, please go ahead.
We could make a game show out of this. Allison Pickard, D2. So I just wanted to talk a little bit in case anybody had any questions. I have an amendment here, policy that under the built environment policy BE5.2 and the letter D. Ultimately, I'm just adding some language. D currently states, utilize financial and regulatory incentives and development agreements to encourage growth in targeted development, redevelopment, and revitalization policy areas. And I'm adding to that and evaluate the use of incentives such as density enhancements, impact and connection fee abatement, reduction in setback requirements, height bonuses, and FAR increases. Many of these tools are present in the current Glen Burnie Sustainable Community Overlay. And I think as we are very focused in this GDP on redevelopment, we need to make sure we understand what it takes to actually accomplish redevelopment. And these are the kinds of incentives and enhancements that are going to get the job done.
Mr. Barron.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and want to thank the sponsor for her advocacy on this. We worked closely on her Glen Burnie revitalization bill, and I'm blanking on the number 60-something-20. It was a very good bill, and I think this is a good addition to the GDP. The administration supports this amendment.
I thought you were going to say the pantheon of strategies. I don't know why that came to mind, but they sure have lots of letters and numbers to designate each one. So they're very important, is what I'm thinking. Does anyone have anything further on the categories we've been in before we go to map type amendments? And I think we have at least one definition we haven't talked about. And that would mainly cover the bigger issues before we got to very specific amendments on Lucas and SRs. Ms. Fiedler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Amanda Fiedler, District 5. So I'm going to touch on small business a little bit. There is an amendment that was floated around. It is not, it is in the works. And I would like to thank Christina Pompa and Cindy Carrier for meeting with me multiple times on this. So in the GDP, small business has been put under the commercial umbrella, which makes sense in one regard, but because it is the least intense commercial use. But it is a transitional land use categorization. It is oftentimes a single structure located in close proximity to residential areas, may even look like a residence. To me, and to many members of the community and business sector, it was a really useful tool that addressed the concerns of commercial creep, if you will, while still allowing for the commercial use in its own pot. So this amendment pulls small business out of that commercial use umbrella into its own. There are challenges in doing that, and we are trying to work those out at this point. What has happened in the 5th district are some businesses who would like to just have small business land use and small business zoning, but have had to request commercial, and they are in close proximity to residential, and they are small structures, everything that I've just stated. So it has become a challenge, and I'm trying to make it the tool that it initially was in the 2009 GDP. And I'm happy to answer any questions. I don't know if this is something that's come up in other districts. I would think that perhaps it has, and I'm happy to discuss further.
Mr. Barron.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Pete Barron with the administration. This is another one of those amendments that was in that pot that was shared with us just hours before this meeting. So the administration has not had a chance to fully review, but pledge that we will continue to work with the sponsor to see if we can get there.
This is the chair. I have a question. Can anyone shed light on why the county created the small business zoning or land use designation and when it was done in the first place?
Pete Barron with the administration. I'm not sure if anybody on our team has that at the top of their head, but I can pledge that we'll write that down and we'll take a look and get that answer to you.
Ms. Pompa?
This is Christina Pompa with the Office of Planning and Zoning. I was going to say I don't have the answer. I don't know if Ms. Carrier has it or not.
She did have her hand up.
I will look in the 1985 code because I believe that's when it first appeared, where there's a definition for small business. It allows the transition from residential to low intensity commercial. And that's something that I can give you more specific information, but it goes back to the early 80s.
Thank you, Ms. Rhodes. Ms. Carrier, did you still want to speak?
Cindy Carrier, Office of Planning and Zoning. I will defer to Ms. Rhodes' research.
It is always spot on. Ms. Rodvian. Ms. Rodvian, you're still muted.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I was ready to go on to a map type amendment if there weren't additional comments on the previous. Lisa Rodvian, District 6.
Pete Barron.
Good. Good?
Well, I was going to say yes, except that Mr. Barron has left his
Oh.
hand up for a long time and I don't know
Okay.
why.
Pete Barron with the administration. I think this fits in the other category. The administration has two amendments I wanted to flag for the council. The first one is they're both pretty small. The first one is changing references to Appendix. So in the while Ms. Schultz is finding it, we're correcting the location of certain data from stating the appendix to pointing to the web page where you can find all that information. And then the other amendment that is also pretty technical is the Errata Amendment. So this is the technical amendments. Errata is the title in my spreadsheet. The administration intends for this amendment, we will request for this amendment to be the last amendment that the council takes up. It makes a number of technical corrections to typos, errors, misplaced references in the document. Doesn't change any substance. It just corrects and makes some technical fixes. So I think those fit under other. So I wanted to flag them while we were on this subject.
Thank you, Mr. Barron. Ms. Rodvian.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Lisa Rodvian, District 6. This is just one of my only map type amendment at this point, basically adding the transit overlay for the Parole Town Center. Obviously, if we don't want to stay stuck in traffic forever, whenever we're in Annapolis, we have to start thinking beyond the car and making sure that this is a transit-oriented location in our county. It is, it's an area already with high density. We're already looking at a transit center there. We've got Highway 50, some of the major roads through Annapolis. 97 is very close by. So I think it makes sense to have this in the Parole Town Center.
Mr. Barron.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Councilwoman Rodvian, and the administration supports.
Okay. Oh, I remembered. Chair Lacy, I have a question about that specifically. Do we have anywhere in Plan 2040 discussion of that's more specific about how we would connect the town centers based on the new plan? I mean, I know we incorporated Move Anne Arundel into Plan 2040, but if you're, for example, we're adding a transit overlay in a particular place that hasn't had one, do we have anything that directly says now we must do X, Y, or Z because of that change?
Lisa Rodvian, District 6. I would like to defer to the administration, possibly Ms. Arzu McIntosh, if she is available.
That's fine with me. If it's fine with you, Mr. Barron, he's nodding his head, so please do.
Martha Arzu McIntosh with the Office of Transportation. So yeah, as part of Move Anne Arundel, those recommendations are clear there. And we have incorporated in Plan 2040 many of the recommendations that did come from Move Anne Arundel into Plan 2040. In terms of what specific language you're looking for, if you can give me exactly what you would like added there so that we can make sure to reference it, then I could work with the Office of Planning and Zoning to see if that has been included.
Thank you. Okay, let's see. So I'm thinking that we could wrap up anything that is not a LUCA as our very specific parcel related requests so that we can take a 10-minute break and then get into those specifics. So I know a couple of council members still had things to discuss here. Ms. Pickard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is Allison Pickard, D2. I just wanted to have a quick conversation about my definition amendment regarding compatibility. You'll see the word compatibility throughout Plan 2040. So I have an amendment to change the definition. Well, it adds to the definition. Currently, it states a measure of the degree to which two uses can exist side by side without one use adversely impacting the other. I've added the uses should complement or blend with the existing built and planned character of the area. You'll notice the term use is used, and that's, I believe, a little misleading, but it is part of the original definition because this is really about form and function, not just compatibility is used throughout our code and throughout this document to represent form and function, not just a use, you know, a gas station versus a laundromat kind of thing. So I really want to make sure when we read this document, when we're seeing compatibility, we're thinking more in the line of complement or blend with the existing community or planned character of the community, because obviously we don't build, we have different design aesthetics throughout the ages, and we don't want to tie our hands with what an area has to look like for the next 50 years based on what it looked like 50 years ago. So that's basically the point of this definition. And I'm not changing it, I'm not adding that language everywhere. I'm not changing the word compatibility throughout the entire document. So changing the definition tends to add a little more clarity there.
Mr. Barron.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We think this is a good amendment. Administration supports.
Anyone else? Mr. Volkey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nathan Volkey, District 3. I don't have an amendment. I actually had a question for DPW if I can, but it falls in this same category of questions about goals and policies. Mr. Phipps, looking on page 111 of the plan under the built environment, specifically BE 15.2, subsection A, it has a couple of goals there. And one of them talks about ramp metering to regulate the rate of vehicles going onto freeways. What exactly does that mean? Is that like, I've seen in other states where they have barricades that limit how many cars can get on and off of a freeway at a given time. Is that what we're talking about with this? I guess I just wasn't clear with that. Also about HOV lanes, are we looking to add those? I don't know of many of them in the county. So kind of what's the plan on all of that? If you can give me some sense there.
Yes, Chris Phipps, Director of Public Works. Those comments or suggestions, I believe, would have come from the Office of Transportation.
Oh, it says your lead. It says your lead, and it says Office of Transportation is support. So that's why I ask you. But if they're better,
yeah, I think, yeah, from a traffic loading standpoint, I think that's really more in their wheelhouse.
Okay.
If Martha can respond.
Yes. So can you repeat the question? I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Just so I can be clear in terms of what I'm responding to.
No problem. Nathan Volkey, District 3. You thought you were off the hook and Mr. Phipps was on the seat. But all right. So I'm on page 111 of the plan. It's under BE, so built environment, section 15 or goal 15, I should say, point 2, and then it's A, 1 and 2 are the ones that I'm looking at specifically.
One quick clarification, it's volume 1, page 111.
Oh yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Martha Arzu McIntosh, and the question is?
Sure, thank you. Nathan Volkey, District 3 again. So the question is, when we use the term ramp metering, is that referring to some kind of barricading process that would limit how many vehicles can get on and off the road at a given time? What are we talking about when we use that term ramp metering there? And is there a plan to implement more HOV lanes in the county? And if so, where are we looking?
So as part of Move and Arundel, we have had various studies in the county, including, I'm sorry, let me start again. Martha Zoom McIntosh from the Office of Transportation. As I was stating, we have had various studies done in the for the county, including the Corridor Growth Management Plan, which identify ramp metering as an alternative or a solution in order to basically work on the congestion in certain road segments that we have along Route 50. We have not done a consecutive study in order to evaluate and implement that strategy, but it has been a strategy that said that it would probably work with further study. That also is the same for the HOV lanes. The HOV lanes were a recommendation in terms of extending the HOV lanes from the PG County line all the way to 97. Again, we are working on obtaining funding in order to study what would be required and how we would implement that in the county and to work with our agency partners to make that happen. So as of right now, we do not have any design of these strategies that have been given to us and studied, but we are working on obtaining funding so that we can move that along to make a determination if that is something that can work for the county.
Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Volpe.
Thank you, Nathan Volke, District 3. Thank you very much for that information. So to follow up on that, would it make any sense that we change these instead of saying use HOV lanes or implement ramp metering, that for both of these, we identify that further study or further review is necessary? And then when we're looking in that column about performance measures, would we want to add any kind of a performance measure there so that we know whether we're hitting that goal or not? I guess I'm just looking at that as something that doesn't seem to, it doesn't sound like it's ready to be implemented yet, but yet the way this is written, it sounds like it is ready to be implemented. So that's what I'm trying to understand.
Sure.
Mr. Barron.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Pete Barron. Councilman Volke, let us huddle about that. I think it's an interesting idea and worthy of a discussion.
Thank you.
And Madam Chair, if
yes,
Pete Barron again, if we're wrapping up before the break, where we'll move to Luca's and SR's, the administration has one or two other sort of small things that I'd like to flag that don't quite fit in that category.
Please go ahead.
There's a amendment dealing with Braggers Road. And this amendment relates to, and I'm trying to see if, yes, we did put it in the notes. Thank you, whoever did that. Council Resolution 3-20, where we acquired the land for a future use as a school and a park. And this amendment recognizes that it's county land and is needed for the potential future use as a school. I just want to flag that amendment. And OOHR 3. Which is a technical fix in the draft hard copy of the GDP that was shared with the council. There was a formatting error and this line was left off. It was in other versions and it was on the digital version, but in the actual document, there was a formatting error and we went from OOHR 2 to OOHR 4. And you'll see in your paper copy, a double line and it just got smushed. And so this fixes that.
Spreadsheets have a way of doing
They do.
that. Even well-behaved and well-designed ones. Okay, I'm going to call a 10-minute break. We'll reconvene at 7:35 and we can jump into the Lucas and SRs and all that then. But also if we haven't yet gotten to anything else you wanted to bring up and discuss about the GDP, we can certainly do that too. So I'll see you all in 10 minutes. Mr. Pruski, you definitely have reserved your place in line for when we start. This is Chair Lacey. Madam Secretary, when you think it's a good time, please call the roll.
Okay, I was waiting for a few more faces to pop back in here. Okay, let's do this quickly. Miss Lacey.
Present.
Ms. Pickard. Mr. Volkey.
Present.
Mr. Pruski.
Still here.
Ms. Rodvian.
Present.
Ms. Fiedler. I'm sorry, I can't read my handwriting this evening.
Present.
Ms. Hare.
Present.
Madam Legislative Counsel, Ms. Schuett.
Present.
And Madam County Auditor, Michelle Belair.
Present.
Great. We're just waiting on Ms. Pickard to rejoin us. Otherwise, everyone is here, Madam Chair.
Excellent. Okay, well, I think we should go ahead and get started. So I'm going to call on Mr. Pruski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I apologize. My internet connection is going in and out, so that's why I want to go first. And I probably have a decent number here, but I'm going to bundle them. So I'm going to make this real quick. Lucas 16 and Lucas 70 are located in Laurel. And both properties were recommended for low density. And again, if Ms. Schultz is putting it up, again, as here, Lucas 16, and the next one again is 70, as she'll show it. But both of those in terms of rationale, they are located near the MARC station in Laurel. And again, P&Z recommended a low density. I have asked for medium density, one up. If you go down in that area, many of the properties are currently medium density. And also, in my opinion, we would consider Fort Meade and also relationship to planned development near MARC stations in walkable communities. It is something that I'd ask the regional committee to consider. So again, those are those two. I don't know if we want to stop because again, I kind of have them bundled, and then we can move on to the next ones.
This is the chair. I think we should stop at each stick of the bundle, if that makes sense. So in case the administration, make sure we give them ample opportunity to jump in here. So Mr. Barron.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Pete Barron with the administration. Appreciate the sponsors' discussion in advance on these, and this will be a refrain that you'll hear from the administration on a number of these. We prefer the staff recommendation. This is definitely something that can and should be looked at in the regional plan. So at this time, we prefer to leave the recommendation as stated in the plan. So we would not support this at this time.
Mr. Pruski, go ahead.
Yep. Okay. Well, I figure I'm gonna kind of compile all the rest together, if you don't mind here. And the reason why is because they are along one corridor. Some are along Route 3 and others along Wall Chapel. Different reasons though. So we can just start in order. Luca 25 is currently a rural property. The property owner is asking for low density residential. Majority of homes in the area do not have 2 acres. This gentleman actually asked to subdivide in the last GDP. And there's emails that went back and forth and it never occurred. It is on a dead end road. And again, the gentleman will be speaking public testimony at the next meeting. Again, that is Luca 25. Luca 84 is off of Watchapel Road. For those of you that don't know, the community that was built in that area, it's a stump dump that is currently on the property. There is a debate whether someone could consider that a landfill. But I did meet with the Planning and Zoning Office, and there's some potential traffic issues on that road. For those of you who don't know, I've been trying to advocate for sidewalks along Watchapel for quite some time and it has not been done yet. And so any increased zoning, particularly on that road. Also, if you ever drive down that area, there was easements taken away from property owners. It's a current minor arterial. It would go to a major arterial again with the intensity. So again, what I'm recommending for that area is to move to an open space designation as opposed to what was given by the county. Then there are 4 LUCAs that are on Route 3. And I know we talked about this last meeting. There was an effort to put a moratorium on Route 3 to stop development. That cannot occur legally. Number one, we don't own the road. Number 2, there has to be an end date and a goal. And so if anything, my proposal is to have the regional committee have the debate about what should go there. And many of the LUCAs that I'm recommending are recommending changes from commercial to mixed use. And my argument would be, and of course the regional committee would do this, is that a mixed use potential could have lesser impact than commercial. If you ever go down Route 2 Ritchie Highway and around Route 3, there's a red C on the map of commercial from C2 to C4. And when people talk about traffic, when you have businesses and other things along those lines, obviously it's of concern. Again, particularly for LUCA 180, I know there is a piece that's commercial and rural. And I think maybe like a mixed use limit or other things of that may be important, but I did want to kind of share, those ones that are there in terms of the impact and concern. So again, these are all kind of related from that. I figure I'd bundle them all at once. Certainly, if folks want to look at them on the map, but without putting a moratorium on, there's got to be a discussion in that regional planning process by this group what to do. Because certainly right now, if we had the intensification that did occur, there's possible that a Walmart could go and other things. So I will stop right there.
Thank you, Mr. Pruski. Mr. Barron?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Pete Barron with the administration. Looking at sort of our general refrain here on LUCA 25, the administration thinks this is something that could be looked at the regional planning process and prefers the current way we have it classified in the GDP. LUCA 84 is, I think, the exception to my refrain. We did take a very close look, as we did with all of these, and we agree with the sponsor. LUCA 84 should be changed, and appreciate the dialogue with the sponsor in getting the right category articulated in the amendment. So we will support that one. On the Route 3 bundle, so 173, 174, 175, and 180. I hope I did that right. The administration recognizes the point the councilman is making, but we would oppose and would prefer that the regional areas, the Stakeholder Advisory Committee, take a look at this and recommend any changes out of that. So with that, that's the administration's position.
Mr. Barron, this is the chair. I have to let you know that your audio was fading out while you were speaking. Of course, we could read what you're saying with the captioning, but please be aware that it's dropping out. Ms.
Apologies.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is Allison Pickard, D2. I just, as we launch into some of these land use change applications, I just want to make sure we're all on the same page in that the underlying land use does not change any zoning. If anything, the land use change opens up a dialogue in individual region plans. So the council, as we move through land use change applications, we're not changing any zoning of any kind. And some of these areas aren't going to receive any comp rezoning for a few years as we go through the region planning process. So I just wanted to put that out there for anybody who's listening at home on April 1st to this really fascinating work session about the GDP.
Who's next? Ms. Fiedler?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to hop over to SRs actually, if we could. And I have 46 and 47 similar issues. And this is something we discussed in the last work session. So these are already developed communities. And if we could pull up the map I sent staff, Ms. Schultz, on SR 46. These are, again, already developed. And I know from a planning perspective, it was kind of some cleanup of the map where surrounding land uses were different than what these all have. But my concern is, yes, this is SR 46. If you can go to the satellite of this, Ms. Schultz. Just wanted you all to see the size of SR 46 when on a map, but want to show what the underlying topography, or this is SR 46 up in right below the yellow. So those are all established homes and plats. So my question is, what does essentially down zoning establish homes? I don't see any, that maybe one or two that don't have a residential structure on them. And I'm just wondering what, from a improvement situation, could a homeowner face if the land use is changed and potentially zoning in the future? And I think this would maybe be for someone in OPZ.
Mr. Barron.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and just Councilwoman, this was, I think we're kind of scrambling on our side. We never actually saw these maps or any language for a particular amendment on these two SRs. But I will ask Ms. Pompa to speak generally to the question you raised about that implication. But I'm going to have to defer and allow us to beg you to allow us to take a look at this specific case when we have some time to review it. We did not see any paperwork on these.
Yeah, Amanda Fiedler, District 5. There is not an amendment on this specific SR or the following one. And the maps are pulled from our own GIS and Plan 2040 map. So, and
Christina,
I know, go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry.
Christina Pompa with the Office of Planning and Zoning. So in general, with the staff recommended changes, we were looking to bring the planned land use in Plan 2040 into conformance with the land use on the ground. And this is not a down zoning. And so there were places, many places in the county where the planned land use from the 2009 GDP was not consistent with on the ground density. And so we did a full review of all of the land use in the county as staff. And these are the results. Now, I haven't looked at this one. I can't tell you as far as the zoning. It would take me a couple minutes. We can come back to you with more information. But I don't think the intent here is any kind of future down zoning. It's really about existing land use on the ground, bringing it into conformance in the plan.
Okay, Amanda Fiedler, District 5. That makes sense to me for this SR. To some degree, I have to go and look at the size of the individual lots. I haven't done that. But I did want, if we could bring up for SR 47 Satellite 2. Because this particular SR has pockets. There's 3 pockets. This particular pocket in SR 47 is an R14, and you can see these little buildings. Each of those is an apartment complex. In the 2009 GDP, it is high density residential. The Plan 2040 has it at low medium density residential. Could this potentially be an error? Because low medium density residential to me is not apartment complexes. Or is there...
Christina Pompa with the Office of Planning and Zoning. We would have to go back and look at this one. You're right. Apartments typically, or multifamily would typically not necessarily correlate with low medium density. But the other thing I see, just in glancing, and I can't tell you that this is the answer, but these do look like, especially the ones to the west in SR 47, that it's not a very densely packed site. And I see that Cindy Carrier has her hand up from the Office of Planning and Zoning, so she may be able to add to what I've said.
Please go ahead, Ms. Carrier.
Thank you. Cindy Carrier, Office of Planning and Zoning. So this is, essentially developed as a plan unit development before we actually had a plan unit development in our code. But what we did with the plan unit developments was look at the overall density of that PUD and determine what the overall density was that would meet sort of the definition of that land use category. So that's what you're seeing as the result of that.
Okay, Amanda Fiedler, District 5. I'm happy to talk more about this one. I just want to make sure that in the document, what is on the ground reflects the land use. And I say that understanding what Ms. Pompa's statement was, that makes sense to me. And I do have, for SR 47, I have a satellite one, the first satellite image, Ms. Schultz, if you could put that up, that was just referenced. That too is a more densely populated community. They're condominiums. Yes, condominiums and a townhome area. I can see from what Ms. Pompa said that perhaps there are some undeveloped areas, but access is a challenge to those. So if we could discuss these two SRs a little further, just to make sure that we are reflecting what is on the ground, and no amendments to introduce or share this evening.
Mr. Barron, did you want to speak to that?
Thank you, Madam Chair, Pete Barron. Yeah, I put my hand up, I think, a little bit as Ms. Fiedler was speaking, just to reiterate that I think a conversation on these two particular issues is in order.
Okay, Ms. Pickard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Allison Pickard, D2. I was going to move along to Luca number 39. I've worked extensively with the Office of Planning and Zoning regarding this land use change, and it's somewhat complicated in that it's a split zoned property. I didn't prepare any maps, but I can if that's helpful for Monday. This is a very clear opportunity for redevelopment. This property is zoned R5 and R15. And so, you could have gone either way really in the land use map or when addressing this land use change, because there are there is high density residential on one side and R5 residential across the street. But the property is also constrained with critical area, and it will, for anything, as I say, cool to happen there to support a change, I think it really could use the full property receiving the high density residential. Obviously, this is just a land use change. If my colleagues support this adoption, it'll continue on to the region planning process, and that group will get another real look at it. Thank you.
Mr. Barron.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Pete Barron with the administration. Going back to our sort of standard line on these, we prefer the description in the GDP as drafted. Councilwoman Pickard raises some very good points, and this is definitely one that deserves a close look in region planning. Either way that the council decides on this amendment.
Ms. Hare.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jessica Hare, District 7. Speaking of one that could use a close look during the regional planning, could we bring up, I think it's Luca 151. This is an interesting piece of property in South County. It's about 30 acres. And the Luca request, it currently has about 1 acre that is already zoned commercial. And there is a sort of gas station facility right there. And the other 29 acres are currently rural agricultural. It's at a fairly major intersection for that part of the county. And the homeowners had asked for a portion of the property to be considered for commercial. I believe they asked for 10 acres. There's been some discussion with the fire department down there, the volunteer fire department, that it might be a more appropriate location for their volunteer fire department to be, as opposed to sort of within Deal proper. I have heard from the community on both sides of this. I've heard some very, very positive reactions that they would like to see additional commercial at this site and potentially a volunteer fire station here. I've also heard from residents that they really don't want to see this. And so this is a really difficult one for me. So while we know that the regional plan groups are going to consider all of the land use that's in here, I wanted to really make it clear in this particular amendment that to really ask the regional planning group to take a close look at this particular parcel and what they want to see there, and consider whether it's appropriate for particular public safety facilities, whether it's appropriate for additional commercial. The neighboring parcels are zoned RA, but there are some permitted uses within RA that are commercial in nature. I think it's either a like a fish store or a garden type store that's right across the street, and it's commercial in nature, even though it's zoned RA. So there are a lot of things here. You really can go either way, and I would like the regional plan to take a very close look at this and bring it back to us with their recommendations. So that's all this amendment says is, hey, we recognize there's a lot of factors going in both directions. Please tell us how you want to use this parcel.
Mr. Barron.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Pete Barron with the administration. I want to commend the sponsor for a pretty interesting approach on this. It's sort of my standard line in amendment form. Yeah, I think that the regional area plan, or the regional stakeholder committee should take a close look at this. The amendment language isn't necessary to have them look at this. If the council is a matter of sort of a statement of intent, it doesn't, not something to get too worked up about. We prefer as drafted, but if the council took this on, it's fine. We would expect the regional, especially given this parcel's, the feelings on it and the potential for the use, it definitely would be something we would anticipate the regional stakeholder group to look at anyway, with or without this language.
Next. I've looked at the spreadsheet, but I can't quite be sure that we've discussed everything everybody would want to discuss. And of course, we don't have to discuss everything on the spreadsheet either. So it's looking like nothing is coming to mind that we actually want to talk about. Notice, I think we all have a lot in mind. No implication of empty-headedness around here at all. Okay, well then I might be suggesting we call in Miss Fiedler. Miss Fiedler.
Sorry, I just thought of something, or someone reminded me of something. Amanda Fiedler, District 5. Just for clarification's sake, there have been a lot of questions, and we have asked this question during work sessions and public hearings. When we get into regional plans, if the regional plan stakeholder committee comes to a difference of opinion or finalizes an opinion on the LUCAs that have notation for regional plan, how does that trigger, or does that trigger rezoning? There is confusion about that transition from regional to regional zoning, rezoning, and how that works. And it is not, if it is recommended by the stakeholder group, does that automatically mean that the rezoning will take place? There's just some clarification that has been expressed as needed from the community.
Mr. Barron, would you like to start with that?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. Pete Barron with the administration. That's probably best handled by the Office of Law to specifically go through. I think it's an important question and important clarification. Office of Law or Ms. Rhodes, I saw you unmute, Ms. Rhodes. So if you want to jump in first, feel free.
I'll let Lori Blair go, or I can go. I mean, it's
I can start.
There's only certain ways that zoning can take place, but I'll let Lori Blair.
Sure, I'll start. Lori Rhodes can jump in. Lori Blair, Klassmeyer, Deputy County Attorney. So the way the process will ultimately play out is that there will be the regional plans that will be brought back to the council for review and approval, and they may not be adopted in the way they look when they come to you. I think that this council can certainly make modifications to those regional plans. They are recommendations, they aren't written in stone. Once the regional plans are approved by the council, there'll be another piece of legislation, which will be the comprehensive rezoning. It'll be the approval of the zoning map for the particular regions in the order at which they are considered. It is my understanding that they will be done in that way. So that chart that has the 3 regions being done each couple years, that's the order that the plans will go in, and then that's the similar or close to the order that you'll see the comprehensive rezoning. So until that third piece of legislation, the GDP being the first piece, the region plan approval being the second piece, until that third piece to do the comprehensive rezoning by adopting new zoning maps occur, there is no rezoning of any property. It is anticipated that the comprehensive rezoning will be consistent with the region plans, and there's some notion that the region plans, because they're coming after the GDP, will operate as an amendment. I think we talked about the amendment earlier, similar to this, an amendment to the GDP. So nothing happens until that third piece of legislation occurs for each region. And if I got that wrong, Ms. Rhodes, please feel free to jump in.
Thank you, Lori Rhodes, Deputy Chief Administrative Officer for Land Use. That is correct. And the other way that the rezoning can occur is through the administrative rezoning process, where they have to prove through an application, through planning and zoning, a change or mistake. The administrative hearing officer will determine whether or not that criteria has been met. That's the other way the rezoning can take place.
And that is in fact, this is Lori Blair, Classmar Deputy County Attorney. Again, that is in fact what would be referred to as a piecemeal rezoning.
Right.
And it's administrative process, and it can only occur due to mistake or other change in character of the neighborhood. There's very limited circumstances.
Ms. Fiedler.
Thank you, Amanda Fiedler, District 5. I appreciate that explanation. And just to summarize, after Plan 2040, we go into the region plans. There will be a adoption by the council with or without changes. And then we go into the comprehensive rezoning. Everything across the board in each of those areas, Plan 2040, regional, and comp rezoning, has to have consistency. So there will be amendments along the way. Is that I see you shaking your head, Ms. Klausmeyer, so I think I've got it summarized, and I hope for the people at home that makes sense.
Yes, Lori Blair Klausmeyer, Deputy County Attorney, that is correct.
Ms. Schuett.
Thank you. I just have one question. Probably this is for Ms. Klausmeyer. When the regional plans come back and are adopted by the county council, and then the comprehensive rezoning bill is introduced, does the council retain the power, despite what the land use map says, to rezone a property that is not in what is not the land use designation? And then, so if you can make it if you can rezone it, not consistent with the plan, do you then come back, does planning and zoning then come back and redo the map if that can even be done? It used to be able to be done is my question. Hope that made sense.
I think so. The question. I think that the notion of consistency is what has to be looked at here between the GDP and the regional plans and the ultimate comprehensive rezoning. And we can certainly expound on that a little bit further. I want to kind of look at that definition and see. I think the notion is that at the end of the process, everything matches up. And how the mechanics of that will ultimately occur is something that probably needs to be discussed or thought about.
Thank you.
Ms. Pickard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Allison Pickard, D2. Just for clarification, as the region planning and subsequent comprehensive rezoning of individual regions is going to be taking place over multiple years, a landowner can apply for comprehensive to rezone their property, having not necessarily gone through a land use change application right now. I'm just wanting to clarify for all of our listeners at home that, 3 years from now, a land parcel, a landowner can say, hey, this is zone C2, I'd like it to really be C3 or C4. They can make that application during comprehensive or before comprehensive rezoning for it to be brought into the process. Am I correct? I mean, I think I'm correct, but I want to be clear.
Lori Rhodes, Deputy Chief Administrative Officer for Land Use. Yes, an applicant can file an application for administrative rezoning, also referred to as piecemeal zoning map amendment. It's a high burden to meet because they would have to show that there was a mistake during the comprehensive rezoning process, or that the character of the neighborhood has changed to such an extent that warrants a rezoning. It's a very heavy burden, but that is an application that could be made for a change.
Madam Chair, may I
go ahead,
follow up with that? I guess that's not exactly what I'm asking. I'm asking if a property is currently, they're not necessarily looking for a land use change designation. They're just looking to be rezoned within, but they haven't started that process now as part of the GDP. Let's say they're already zoned commercial. and we're going to be going through comprehensive rezoning now. We're actually rezoning parcels, not necessarily addressing the land use change map. Well, can those, will folks be applying for comprehensive rezoning? Is there an application to have your property rezoned at the appropriate time?
Ms. Pompa?
Christina Pompa with the Office of Planning and Zoning. So similar to the process that we used during the general development plan update, where we opened applications for land use changes, we would do the same thing for comprehensive rezoning during any particular region plan that was open and underway.
Okay, thank you. That was my understanding. That's what I just wanted to make sure.
Mr. Kai Ziegler?
Steve Kai Ziegler. I just want to echo really where Ms. Pompa was. So as Lori Rhodes said, right now, any property owner can apply for an administrative rezoning, meaning the change or mistake. Anybody in the county who owns land can go through that process now. Through the region planning process, as that plan is being developed, we'll have an application process where anyone within that region who's requesting a change in zoning through comprehensive rezoning will be allowed to do that. And it doesn't necessarily have to relate for that property owner to the exact land use that they received through the GDP or the land use designation or recommended zoning that occurs through region planning process. They may ask for all kinds of different things that nobody thought or intended for that piece of property. And we'll review that just like we have the land use designations, as Christina had said.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Does anyone else have a comment, question, idea, ephemeral stream of thought, anything? Okay, I don't think I see any, except that Mr. Barron and Ms. Pickard still both have their hands raised.
Happy spring break, everybody.
That's right.
Pete Barron, I don't want to be the wet blanket as we're wrapping this up. We unintentionally skipped one of the administration's amendments, and I just want to flag it unless I am spacing on this. There is an amendment related to the resource sensitive policy area overlay map, historic resources. This is a corrective amendment. I want to, I think, thank Ms. Rodvian. It became clear that one community, one historic community had been left out, and it was a GIS error that that layer wasn't included. So this amendment just includes the historic resources on the resource sensitive policy area overlay map. And I think it's an important amendment to make sure is discussed if there are any questions.
And are there any questions? I think unless there was a historic wet blanket on that property, probably not an overall wet blanket or this whole work session. Thank you everyone for taking the time on this Thursday evening and part of spring break, except to those of us who have new babies. They aren't on spring break. They don't know what that is. Looking at you, Mr. Volke. I'll see everybody. Join us on Monday evening at 6 p.m. for our regular